All right, good afternoon. My name is Greg Fenves. I'm the president of the University of Texas at Austin, and I want to thank you all for being here. This is the fourth year that the University of Texas has hosted the Texas National Security Forum. And it's events like this that have helped make UT into a focal point on discussions of key national security issues of our time. The forum brings together distinguished leaders from government, from the military, from universities, and the private sector. And at the University of Texas, we're so proud it offers such a unique opportunity to learn from one another from different perspectives and to deepen our understanding of the far-reaching and complex threats and other challenges that we face as a nation. There's an old saying that goes, "Tell me and I forget." That happens to me a lot. "Teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I learn." And that's exactly what the Texas National Security Forum is designed to do, especially for the University of Texas students that are here today and other community members, to get you involved so you may learn. It's an opportunity for our students to engage with those who make and carry out national security policy for the United States, to learn from them, to listen, to hear about the issues in the news. And I hope the students who are here today, and I see many of you here, become inspired and energized and motivated to further learning and research or to join leaders in national security service. The excellence of this forum is a reflection of the vision and the leadership of two organizations on campus, but a couple key individuals. The two organizations are the Clements Center and the Robert Strauss Center and their joint intelligence study project. And I'd especially like to thank the directors of these units, Will M. Bowden, Bobby Chesney, and Steve Slick. Let's give them a round of applause. And all the staff and the faculty who have helped put this program together, we are very grateful. I'd also like to thank Stratford, the Texas National Security Network, and the LBJ School of Public Affairs here at UT for co-sponsoring this forum. Their contributions have been essential to make it as broad and as successful as it's been. And I've been very impressed with the panel and the presenters who are here with us today. We're honored to have each of you here on our campus, and we know how busy your schedules are and how demanding your work is. It means so much to us that you made the trip here to Austin. Now it is my privilege to introduce the keynote speaker for today's forum, the Director of Central Intelligence, Michael Pompeo. Director Pompeo was sworn in as the 22nd Director of the CIA in January of this year. As the Director of the CIA, his responsibilities are far-reaching and vital to the security of the United States. He leads an agency charged with intelligence collection, analysis, covert action, counterintelligence, as well as managing vital liaison relationships with foreign intelligence services. Before he became director, he was on his fourth term serving the nation as a congressman representing the 4th District of Kansas, where he served on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence as well as the Energy and Commerce Committees. Director Pompeo is an accomplished businessman, having run successful companies in the aerospace and energy industries. And he served our nation as an Armor Branch Cavalry officer in the U.S. Army, patrolling the Iron Curtain prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. He's a graduate of Harvard Law School and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. It's an honor to have you here today with us, Director, and as a token of our gratitude, we do have a special University of Texas gift for you. Now, Director Pompeo, we were chatting before the meeting, was not too happy the Longhorns beat Kansas State Wildcats last weekend. A great team from your home state. It was a close game, double overtime, classic college football game. But as a Kansan, we understand that it must have been difficult to take, but we just want you to know that we are giving you this gift in our friendly relationship between the state of Texas and the state of Kansas. So let's see. Oh, here it is. It's right here. Okay. So we have this little gift for you.
Very nice.
Pompeo.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's very kind.
So, Director Pompeo, we have another big game coming up on Saturday against Oklahoma. So I don't know how you feel about Oklahoma, but we'll suit you up just in case, all right? Please welcome the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Michael Pompeo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, President. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a Shocker fan, so the whole K-State thing. That's very kind, very generous. My wife did get me in the burnt orange tie today, so I am completely ready for this afternoon. And indeed, it's a lot of fun to be here. A real privilege, to be sure. You know, at this very moment, somewhere in the world, there is a young CA officer preparing to head out on a mission. There's not much of a U.S. footprint there, and it's often a place where our brothers and sisters in the military can't operate. The infrastructure our officers will need will be built by the agency and its support specialist. If we need technology, that will have been delivered by CA technologists. These are legendary operations conducted by people just like you all. I see these students out here. These are young officers who have decided to come be patriotic leaders operating in a clandestine space. And in fact, as I think about that, think about time zones, think about where these operations might be taking place. As we're sitting here in this beautiful hall here today, if we weren't doing that, we wouldn't be delivering what our senior leaders most need. You know, espionage, Webster talks about it as this, the art and science of running assets and stealing secrets. That's what we do. It is the heart of the organization that I lead. But I want to talk a little bit about why we do it and how that's important. In America, we do not do espionage for fun, although it often does bring joy and professional satisfaction. And we don't do it to help American businesses or to spy on our fellow U.S. citizens. No, in our republic, the CIA does espionage for a singular purpose. It's to collect foreign intelligence to keep our country safe. Period. Full stop. I raise this because while it may seem trite, there are those who don't think that's the case. But more importantly, as I will share to you today, that singular purpose is what allows us to be as effective as we are. So that'll be the first thing I want to get across to you today, is the effectiveness that we derive at the CIA from having a singular focus on the collection of foreign intelligence supporting America's national security. Second thing you should know, and I'll talk about this some today, is that we can't perform our mission if we're not aggressive, vicious, unforgiving, relentless, you pick the word. Every minute we have to be focused on crushing our enemies and providing a tremendously unfair advantage for our diplomats, for our military, and for our president. It's why I find so much joy in it. This seems obvious, perhaps too, but it's not always been the case or all that straightforward, and I'll talk about that some. But today I want to share with you why this matters, how it is the case that our singular purpose and our aggressive nature drive our ability to provide assistance for our policymakers and to help be part of a team delivering security for our country. So, to begin, why does it matter? Why does it matter that we have this singular purpose? The purpose makes a difference, and I want to offer this to you by nature of a comparison. I want to show it to you by comparing our purpose to an organization that has a very different purpose, and I will use the Iranian intelligence service today to talk about that. In America, at our founding, Americans were deeply skeptical of intelligence collection. Indeed, we were the last superpower to actually have a national spy service. We didn't have one until the CIA was created in 1947. It was our country's first peacetime intelligence agency. Like the other elements of U.S. national security community, we take our obligation to defend the Constitution and obey the rule of law incredibly seriously. I run a pretty big law firm. We're subject to oversight. Oversight from the court system on many of our programs, oversight from Congress, a committee that I served on, while I was a member of the House of Representatives, representing our fellow citizens to make sure that we're doing the right thing and doing it in the right way. But because our espionage is aimed at this singular purpose, we work with a sense of duty, purpose, and righteousness, and a resolve that a lot of our foreign adversary intelligence services can't possibly achieve. And we're far more effective as a result of that. So let's compare. Let's compare what the Islamic Republic of Iran does with its intelligence service and how it behaves. And I'll suggest to you that's why we can defeat them everywhere if we properly apply our tradecraft. They have two. One's called the MOIS. That's the formal intelligence service. The second one is run by an organization called the IRGC. It would be their elite forces designed to operate externally. Their task in Iran is enforcing the rule of law in a thuggish police state. They can't be effective in spying because they provide a ton of their time and a ton of their energy against the problems that we don't know, the imprisonment of their own people. Put it another way, the Ministry of Intelligence and Security and the IRGC are the cudgels of a despotic theocracy. The IRGC is accountable to a singular person, the supreme leader. They're the vanguard of a pernicious empire that is expanding its power around the Middle East. And unlike ISIS and its mirage of a caliphate, Iran is now a powerful nation state that remains the world's largest state sponsor of terror. In recent years, the IRGC has been reckless and provocative in a way our agency never should be, nor could be. They've exploited the vacuum in the Middle East to aggressively expand their influence, and they openly vow to annihilate not only our country, but Israel as well. And when you look at the death and destruction that has taken place in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, it has been Tehran, led by their intelligence services, that have been at the root of much of it. But it isn't just our allies that are put in danger by the Islamic Republic. The Iranian people are as well, as are we here in America. It was only 4 years ago, if we'll all recall, that a U.S. citizen was sentenced to 25 years in prison for plotting with the Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. Had the plot not been thwarted by authorities, the operation would have killed not only the Saudi ambassador in our own capital, but a host of innocent bystanders at a popular D.C. restaurant. Just this month, an American soldier serving with the 10th Mountain Division in Iraq was killed by an IED in an area controlled by Iran and its intelligence service. We don't have direct evidence to link it to them, but it's an area controlled by the Shia militants, and the design of the weapon system clearly points to a singular agent. Capturing American soldiers and taking Americans hostage, abusing human rights on a massive scale and oppressing its own people, these are the goals to which the Iranian intelligence service is put. It's a big contrast to us, and that matters. Because at the end of the day, we collect foreign intelligence in support of a republic founded on deeply moral principles, and our work is bounded by the Constitution. This is incredibly important. It makes us more effective in our own mission because our officers and agents understand the goal is moral and noble and not repressive and destructive. The CIA's power is increased by this singular force, and we as a country benefit from that. To my second point today. While we serve to protect and uphold our Constitution, we are in the business of stealing secrets. And we steal them from some of the most brutal, oppressive regimes in the world. And so when espionage is done right, when it's most successful, it is inherently aggressive, relentless, and risky. President Eisenhower probably had this in mind when he said that spy work is, quote, a distasteful but vital necessity, end of quote. I personally find no distaste in it because our work is so necessary. But I know what Ike meant, a fellow Kansan, so I think I can understand where he's coming from. He meant it requires a seriousness and a viciousness not often found in the salons of Washington, D.C. The individuals who we hire are different in kind from other places in our government, and America is served well by that. Look, at the CIA, we don't always get invited to the swankiest parties and hang out with the global elites. I personally am very fine with that, but I think all our officers are. What we do is gritty work. we are in our enemy's space. And when there's something around the world that needs to be thwarted, we are always invited to that party. Look, there have been moments in CI's history when we weren't sufficiently aggressive, and it's had enormous negative consequences to our country. One such period was following the Church and Pike Commissions in the 1970s, when our nation's agency lost confidence. It had become insufficiently self-assured. Our morale was at about its lowest point in history at Langley. As the Brits would have said about us, we were on our back foot. And while the CIA was hardly the sole determining factor, the agency's lapses certainly contributed to a difficult and dangerous global situation. The Soviets and their proxies were making deep inroads in the Third World, culminating in the invasion of Afghanistan. In Iran, the U.S. Embassy was infamously attacked and occupied, its staff rounded up, blindfolded, and taken hostage. These were tough times for our agency. Another dark period for the agency arose in the 1990s as a result of the so-called peace dividend. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the CIA's budget was slashed, its roster reduced by thousands of officers. Operational and analytic programs were cannibalized to bolster a crumbling infrastructure. Worst of all, by far, our men and women were preoccupied with budgets and staffing. Austerity inhibited our ability to execute our mission. President Trump gets this. He knows this history. Whenever we've discussed the challenges our agency is facing, he has given us what we need, whether it's funding, the authority to execute our mission, or policy guidance. He has always provided it for us. He understands and knows that he is relying on our ability to deliver him the information he needs to make sound decisions. And he's prepared to allow us to take risks. As long as we're doing it well, as long as we're working to mitigate them, as long as they make sense, I'm confident that he and the current administration will support our agency's efforts. So we're taking several steps with the President's support to make CIA faster and more aggressive. First, I personally stressed our officers that they must have the courage to fail. Now, that may sound strange, but I'm an engineer by training, so I know that if you take risk, it's a sheer mathematical certainty that you will sometimes fail. And I want our officers to know that. It's okay. As long as they've done their homework, as long as they've gone about their work in the right way, failure to achieve an objective doesn't mean that they have let the agency down. I sometimes joke that we should provide an award for failure. We should have the failure of the week or the failure of the month. What I mean by that is if we are not out pushing the envelope, the agency simply will not succeed in the environment in which we're required to operate today. Look, I prefer success a great deal to failure, make no mistake about it. But I understand, too, that if you drill a handful of wells every now and again, you don't get the return you're looking for. And if you're afraid to drill that dry hole, if our officers are afraid to fail, you'll never take the risk necessary to get the job done. And frankly, at the CIA, tough jobs are what we're all about. It's why we were created. It's our statutory mandate. And we have to make sure our officers have the freedom and the support to tackle the really hard problems that face our country. The second thing we're doing is that we're deploying more officers to the field. The CIA is a foreign intelligence service. The threats we're charged with lie overseas, beyond our shores. That's where we have to be, in force, every day, with all of the strength and capacity we can possibly muster. We want our people, tools, and resources to be as close to the center of the fight as we can put them. That way we can seize the opportunity quickly, and we can be proactive and move to aggressively defeat our adversaries instead of reacting to them. The project you'll read about in the press will be called Field Forward. It's critical to the strategy, and I'm confident we'll build a stronger, more agile agency that will serve America well. We also benefit a great deal from our partner services throughout the world. I spend time nearly every day speaking to or meeting with liaison services who are prepared to work alongside the CIA and the American Intelligence Service to deliver on behalf of the United States. I know they're a topic of this forum, and I'm happy to talk more about it in my conversation with Steve, but they are central to the accomplishment of the agency's mission. And finally, I come from a background mostly in business, My deepest understanding of leadership suggests there is only one way for an organization to succeed. You have to push decisions down to the lowest level possible that is adding value. As many as a third of the things that came to the director's desk the day I started no longer come to me. But that's totally insufficient. If it's just me, this will be a fool's errand. I want every one of my officers to understand that if they're reviewing a project, they're looking at a task, they're evaluating a mission, they should first ask themselves, am I adding value to this decision process? If not, if you're just signing it, or you're a looky-loo, or you're just another fella or gal in the loop, don't look at it anymore. Trust the people beneath you, and then hold them accountable. Because if you delegate that authority, if you put it in the right place, if you get it to the right people, they'll make good decisions. They won't always be the decision that you would have made, but they'll have done it based on the direction, the commander's intent that you provided them. And if you support them in that, our agency will be sufficiently nimble to defeat our adversaries. Before I sit down and talk with Steve, I want to thank everyone here. This is very special to be at this great university. It's also great to get outside the Beltway. I spend most of my mornings not here, but rather with the president. I brief the president nearly every day. My deputy filled in for me this morning in Washington. And I told the president I was coming out that way, and he said, just make sure you recruit a few good ones. And so I could not leave this opportunity this morning without sharing with you that I do hope that the young people in the audience today will seriously consider a life in public service. And if you really want to get after it in a unique way, to have technical and human and phenomenally intellectually challenging work to do, the CIA is a great place to go do it. I had a chance to meet with Admiral McRaven. He came out to the agency, I guess now 3 weeks ago. He was great. I really appreciate him coming out. He taught our officers a great deal about leadership himself. And then last, I thought I'd close with this. In May of every year, the agency holds its memorial service to honor those who have fallen in the line of duty at the CIA. It's a little different for a CIA officer when they are not successful and don't come back. In the military, I remember when we would lose a soldier, the families would come around, but often our officers operate in the shadow. So this day is very special. This last spring, we gave tribute to 8 heroes, CIA men who died in the line of duty, and we added their star to our memorial wall. Of those 3 of them were Texans. Mark Rausberger was an exceptionally accomplished officer, a veteran who had served with our agency for 18 years. He was a dedicated patriot, a courageous warrior. He was calm and resolute. I wish I could tell you his whole story. It's extraordinary. He was a loving husband and father who cherished his family. And then 2 from some time ago, Darrell Eubanks and John Lewis. They were childhood friends, born in Lampasas, Texas. As teens, they both went off to become smoke jumpers in Idaho. And if you know the history of the agency from this era, smoke jumpers had exactly the right skill set that the CIA needed. They joined the CIA and delivered supplies to our allies in Cambodia and in Laos when their plane crashed in August of 1961. Darrell, John, and Mark all embodied the values of Texas and of the agency. They were brave, big-hearted, faithful, and adventurous, exactly the people that make our agency so great. Thank you all for joining me here today. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Director. That was terrific. Thank you for those remarks. And maybe more important, thanks very much for coming to Texas, sharing them with us, and also for engaging our what you'll find to be well-informed and spicy student body and local community. If I could, I'd like to start by taking you up on your invitation. You mentioned, referred to the theme of the conference, alliances and partnerships. Borrowing from John McLaughlin's primer that he gave us a little bit before you arrived, I think most Americans do understand what our diplomats do around the world, engaging with foreign partners and managing diplomatic relationships. Most Americans also understand our military alliances, NATO and others that play a great role in keeping us safe. But I suspect very few people really understand what we refer to as the intelligence liaison function, and the role that CIA plays at the center of really a global network of security services that are about some shared values and some shared tasks. So how do you understand that after your time in office? You mentioned how much time you spent with these folks, but what's it do for us?
So it's a great question. I get asked often what has surprised me at the CIA, and it is the case. We're doing some cool things that I didn't know about, and that's fun. Great Americans doing hard stuff in hard places. But this surprised me a great deal too. The agency is scaled, right? It's a big organization. It is truly global. But in spite of that enormous reach that we possess internally, we couldn't possibly accomplish our mission without these partner services. We're often 10x their size or 50x their size. But they often will know a piece of terrain better than we do. They'll often know an adversary better than we do. Sometimes they'll have a technical skill set that we don't behave, and sometimes they just occupy a piece of real estate that we'd love to get to. And they can help us achieve that objective as well. Look, these are partnerships, so we provide them with assistance as well. We'll often train them. We'll often provide them with information that we share amongst each other. We have robust analytic exchanges with dozens and dozens of our foreign liaison partners. And then there are many times we work on operations alongside them as well. And they are, it is more than 1 + 1 = 2 when you find a good local service that can help you achieve something. In many countries, Steve, we often have relationships with more than one service. In different parts of the world, we'll have them with their external service, their internal service, all of that. They're great partnerships and worthy of our effort to nurture them to build a global national security capacity that's in service of America.
That's terrific, and I must say it tracks fairly closely.
That's good. I never like. I try not to contradict John every day.
It's very impressive. But anyway, you mentioned your schedule, and you mentioned maybe as a surprise to some of your predecessors, just how much time it takes that you spend with these people, with these relationships, nurturing them, making sure they're productive and safe. But that also brings you into contact with a lot of senior security officials from overseas who do have these deep and often long-standing relationships with U.S. intelligence. But what are they telling you? What are they concerned about? I mean, these relationships require tending. Sometimes they don't think we can keep their secrets. Sometimes they think we don't keep our word. Sometimes they think we don't understand their local politics. But what are you hearing today from our friends overseas?
Look, sometimes each of those is true. Sometimes we haven't kept the secrets. I regret that. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we keep those secrets. Once we stole them, ain't no reason to let anybody steal them back. But what I hear from them today is they have a deep recognition that they need the American partner, that we have an understanding of the world, even though they'll often have policy disagreements with us, or there'll be a political challenge between our countries. At the security level, we understand that the need to perform that function well, if the two countries are having a political spat, it is not particularly important to our capacity to continue to keep our citizens safe, ours and theirs. And so what I find is you'll see the politics of the day and you'll see the news story of the moment. And if we're doing our jobs well as security officials, none of that will impact our ability to continue to drive to keep national security at the forefront of what we do, below the level, below the public fray, and in a way that serves our countries well.
Important but little understood.
Yeah.
This network. I think that's right. Consistent with my experience, at least. Let me turn to the next question I had for you, and that's restructuring. I'm sure you've dealt with this. It was something we discussed before you took office. So you walked in and inherited the directorship of an agency that was in the midst of a still incomplete restructuring that was designed by your predecessor. Some of our students sort of know the contours of this. It brought analysts and operators closer together in mission centers and prioritized digital technology. So with the time you've had in office, how do you feel about this? What's working? What's not working? Still have to go back to that toolbox and tinker?
Yeah.
Or is it just about where you want it?
So I have never seen a organizational restructuring work the first time perfectly. I did two myself in private sector. May never take one on again. They're all, the cost has nothing to do with the actual cost of the implementation. It's all about people and time and loss of focus while you're making these transitions. So myself, my deputy, and the team concluded we weren't going to go back and revisit that in its entirety, but rather take the field where it lay and make it better. And we hope we've done that. Pieces of it work. There's no doubt that having our analysts and the folks who conduct our operations communicating matters. It works. It's material. It's important. This has happened for decades in the agency. You would have seen this, Steve. In the field, cubicle 1 is an analyst, cubicle 2 is an operator, and you couldn't tell between the two. It hadn't happened always back in Langley, and so now that is at least partially rectified. Biggest challenge that I think came from the restructuring that hadn't settled up by the time I got there was this issue of authority and decisions. Who gets to make the call? We now operate in a matrix environment, and for any of you who've ever been in business, many corporations operate that way today. It requires even better leaders, even better managers, even leaders that really understand commanders' intent, and it requires even more collaboration than it would if you simply had a vertical org chart. Having said all of that, I have spent most of my time preaching to the group that I have run organizations with really good people and a bad org chart, and really bad people and a good org chart, and give me the former, not the latter, every time. I haven't made it a rule yet, but I may. I don't want to see any printed org chart on anybody's cubicle wall because the speed of our adversaries today precludes us from being locked in. It is the case. We are task organizing against our adversaries. If a structure isn't working, they should not wait for the director to go blow it up and fix it. They should immediately disassemble it and reassemble the resources as against the problem. And we've seen some great examples of that. We're only 9 months in. But relatively junior leaders recognizing that they didn't have the right tools, and they had some tools they frankly didn't need. They hand back the former, they grab the new tools, and they go on down the road, and nobody feels like they were slighted because they didn't have some title or they didn't sit some special place in the chart. They're crushing our adversaries. And after all, why else would you sign up to be a CA officer, right? It's not to get a title chief or deputy or, everybody's a deputy. Knock yourself out. It's about executing the mission. And I hope we've convinced folks to spend a lot less time admiring the org chart and a lot more time focused on the mission set.
And of course, you understand well, having done this before, that what that means for you is you're going to have some people make decisions you wouldn't have made.
Yep.
And you're going to get surprised.
Yep. Has happened, will happen, I demand that it happens. It's the case. If you as a leader are going to truly enable someone that's on your team to be successful, and you are only going to count that as successful if they make the same decision you would have made each and every time, first of all, you'll find that you're not as smart as you thought you were. That is, they'll make the decision you want and it won't work. Right? So you were wrong. I'm much happier to have someone say, here's the direction I went, and live with their decision so long as they understood the intent, they were driving towards the same mission. If I think I can add value, I'll step in. I'll say, nope, you're off the reservation. Here's the place that's got to come back in. I'm not advocating anarchy, but rather degrees of freedom that are totally consistent with the character of the human beings that work for me. There may be organizations it wouldn't work in. It'll work at CIA. And my team probably wouldn't say this, but I'm happy with small surprises.
Okay. Make a note.
Small.
Politics, if you don't mind. So we spent
I actually mind a lot. I left it for a reason.
You knew it was coming. Never leave it completely. So we spend a lot of time in our seminars. We teach intelligence here, at least the wave tops, the principles of intelligence. We spend a lot of time trying to define what the ethos is of this really unique and important profession. And somewhere near the core of that, no matter who you're talking to, you're going to find this notion that the analytic process, the judgments that are reached by all source analysts and conveyed to policymakers must be insulated from the political process and partisan politics. Now, you, of course, came out of maybe the most political branch of our government, of course, and so you have positions on foreign affairs topics, and that's perfectly appropriate. But what kind of safeguards do you have in place at the agency today that will ensure that a single analyst, a team of analysts, can safely reach a judgment that may not be consistent with your political position or maybe the administration's policies?
Sure. That's a fair question. Steve, you've been there. I want to characterize this properly. For an analytic line, for a position that the agency takes on a particular issue, to make its way up to senior levels has enormous, rigorous review, enormous. Query whether that's all timely enough and whether it gets us to sufficiently aggressive analytic product. That is, the tendency is to be slow and bland. The more you look at it, the more the document gets sandpapered. Having said that, that rigor matters. The fact that we are not political and our analytic lines that say don't change from administration to administration is critical. There are many safeguards. I'll give you perhaps the most important one. See some soldiers over here. Couple 100 political employees at DOD. I don't know how many state has. More than that.
Heck of a lot.
I comprise 25% of the political employees at the Central Intelligence Agency. My deputy, a 30-year career officer, would be the second presidentially nominated person. And then a lawyer and the IG. It gets me to 4, right? Yeah. Everyone else is a trained career professional who truly do breathe in the ethos of providing the truth to our policymakers. That's powerful. It's important. It is honored at the agency. So far as I can tell, it has been for an awfully long time. And so it's good. So we do. I deliver. I talked about being with the president every day. I have this enormous privilege. I deliver to the president nearly every day this exquisite product that has touched many, many hands, not just CIA hands, hands from all of the intelligence community. That product is the distillation of what I talked about in my opening. Some case officer in a distant place grabbing a little piece of information that's now been put into our analytic product. It is absolutely imperative that that is the truth as best the intelligence community knows it. And it's an honor to deliver that product every day to the most important policymaker in the world. And frankly, we don't often talk about this, or I certainly don't, because I get asked about the president more often than anything else. We deliver to scores of officials around the U.S. government, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce, for the first time in a long time, reads our stuff. It's great. The administration is truly demanding of what we do, and we're delivering them some products that we hadn't delivered before. I think additive to the administration's capacity to understand what's going on in the world so that they can formulate good policy.
Thank you. That's terrific. I'd like to give you the opportunity to resolve a mystery in Washington that's confounding the intelligence commentariat, or whatever we call folks who follows these sorts of issues. I tuned in closely when you made your first public remarks and fielded some questions at CSIS down at Georgetown. Our friend Juan Zarate was moderating. You went out of your way in those remarks, it seems to me, to single out the WikiLeaks organization, its founder, and very precisely described them as a hostile intelligence service. Several months later, that same phraseology was under debate in the Intelligence Authorization Bill. Several senators wanted to edit or amend that. It seemed to many of us that was very precise. What's the meaning that attaches to this organization that regards itself as a media outlet? I would be the last one to take up their brief for any purpose, but that's what they claim to be. Yet you and others in the administration are keen to give them this designation. What does that mean in a practical and a legal and an operational sense?
For an awfully long time, the CIA's adversaries were nation states, and nearly exclusively nation states. That's simply no longer the case. So much of our structure, a good deal of our legal authority was built around the idea that we would collect intelligence against actors of nation states. Today, there's another category of intelligence service that has done and continues to work to destroy the United States of America. And so and you mentioned WikiLeaks, they're one of several. In fact, in my remarks, I regret I focused on them a bit too much. I singled them out in a way that doesn't do justice to all the other bad actors that I intend to go take on as well.
There are more.
Yes. So come one, come all. We need to develop a structure, an analytic rubric, and an operational methodology to go take down these non-state intelligence services in the same way the CIA has perfected its ability to do it against those that are state actors. I would give you organizations that aren't states that provide that in addition to it, right? How about this perfect example, Hezbollah? As far as I know, not UN recognized as a state, has an incredibly capable counterintelligence effort against the United States of America. We have to beat them. Every place we find organizations of that nature, state or non-state, we're going to take them on. And that was the message for that day. I wanted to encourage not just the agency, but the entire intelligence community to recognize how this has morphed, how we no longer have a single set of threats, and we have to develop a rubric with which to do that, to take on those non-state actors.
But the aim is, just to be clear, with an organization like that, take down and not penetrate and report on.
Well, I mean, penetrate and report. That's what we do, right? We're a foreign intelligence collection service, so that's what we do. So we collect intelligence with the mission to deliver that to our policymakers. So when I use the term take down, I'll try and strike it from my vocabulary. So they present a threat. They're trying to steal our stuff. So we do have to take down their capacity to perform intelligence against us. We need a robust CI effort, counterintelligence effort, against them, in addition to against our hostile intelligence services, our state actors. And then we have an FI challenge. We want to go collect on them, understand them, developing a deeper understanding of how it is they're posing a threat to the United States, and deliver that to policymakers in Washington.
Terrific. Thanks for that. Thanks for taking that on. I don't want to monopolize your time. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So think about what you'd like to ask the director. Priorities. So you got into this a little bit in your remarks. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say something more if you wish to. But remember when we talked once before, I was the negative Nelly who was reminding you that the terms in office, the tenures of modern CIA directors are not generally very long. Sometimes that's for welcome reasons. Sometimes that's for unwelcome reasons. They get promoted,
yeah.
or they get moved on.
Just so y'all know, the mean's about 2 years. I'm grinding to be.
See, you were paying attention. All right. So the point is, that means as a leader, you understand you have to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You got to establish your priorities. You got to get on it right away if you're going to have any impact, because you're not going to be around forever. So what do you want to do with this 70-year-old bureaucracy that was there before you got there? It's going to be there after you leave.
Yeah.
How would you like to shape it?
So I talked a bunch of it, right? A lot of it's about character and culture. So I want to make sure the culture is a culture of decentralization and risk-taking within the confines of the law, and in a way that a world-class organization would operate in our century. And then second thing, I think all of us in any organization that we're part of, we're working diligently to make sure that we leave behind a set of leaders that will put us in good stead 10 or 20 years from now. So we're working on our understanding of how we do retention and training in a way that hasn't been considered before, in a holistic way inside the agency. The benefits of that will happen long after I'm gone. But if we can do that, Stephen, you'd know this, if we're looking at our most senior leaders and we've got a position, I want to make sure that the director that follows me, or the one after him or her, I want to make sure that director is trying to figure out which of 5 fantastic officers to choose, and not trying to figure out how they're going to fill a hole that they don't have someone to fill. If I can do that, if we can put our leadership trajectory in the right path, I'll consider a good service having been done for America.
Culture and people.
Culture and people.
Makes sense. Questions for the director? Fellow here from Camp Mabry, if we can get a microphone over.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time, very much for your time, truly. My name is Dan McKee. I'm a staff sergeant in the Army National Guard here in Texas, and what we've seen throughout the first evolution and the first discussion point, as well as the second, that reemphasized the state-to-state cooperations and partnerships, military to military. Some of the themes that have been expressed and touched on by all 8 of the previous speakers emphasized and highlighted the transnational and transborder relationships of intelligence agencies. And so it's kind of a softball, but we'd love to have your take on which intelligence discipline means the most, or in the 21st century environment, which one has the the most potential to change or improve the quality of collection?
This is the taste great, less filling debate. You're welcome to weigh in on.
So thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it. Oh, look, the agency's great. We're the lead horse on human intelligence collection, as designated by the executive branch, and so we love that. Having said that, I have not seen very many human intelligence operations in my 9 months that didn't have significant support from someplace else in the world. Almost always our friends at NSA are helping. We in the agency go very few places with our sisters and brothers in the Department of Defense. I mean, it would be hard for me to pick a theater where we don't have enormous support from DoD. And so very, very necessary. So the intelligence collection, the military intelligence collection feeds into our process as well. At the agency, this is probably not thought of much, but I think we have some of the most sophisticated technologies anywhere in the world. I would put our team up against world-class organizations sitting in Austin or in Silicon Valley in terms of our understanding of technology as it's evolving. We're not fast enough. We've got to do better, but we're good. And so we're always looking for talented people to perform that end of our technological intelligence collection as well. I don't know that there's a first amongst equals. It is the case that human intelligence, just like signals intelligence has gotten harder with encryption, human intelligence has an analog to that. As the next generation of officers all occupy prominent space on Facebook, it's hard for them to hide in the same way that they could 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. And so our tradecraft has to develop and evolve as well for us to continue to be able to put real people in tough places to get that most important information. Does that answer the question, at least in part? Thank you, Sergeant.
Who do we have here? Ma'am in the red.
I got it over here. Sorry. Excuse me.
Okay, what is the CIA doing to protect us from further Russian efforts to undermine our democracy and to sow dissension with our allies?
So I can't talk a lot. I'll start with that. It's a serious threat and one that we take very seriously. I can't talk about all the efforts that we're undertaking, but make no mistake about it, the U.S. government understands the Russians' efforts. We won't stop them all, every place, all the time. I'm confident of that too, but we can do much better than we have done for the last 4, 6, 8 years. Their tradecraft has evolved. Their cyber tradecraft has evolved. The human collection has evolved as well. And we need to make sure that we, along with our partners at FBI and our partners at Homeland Security and our partners at NSA and our partners at the Department of Defense, are all working side by side to ensure that we understand not only the threat from Russia, but I mean, we've got enormous threats from Iran. We've got enormous threats from China. Perhaps those three mark the world-class high watermark. We shouldn't forget, I've now gone over an hour without mentioning the words North and Korea consecutively. I'm going to do it. They have an enormous set of cyber operations in addition to the nuclear missile threat that is much talked about. Their cyber capability is very, very good as well. We have lots of work to do to protect the homeland from those threats as well.
Terrific. Larry. You may know Austin resident Larry Wright. I'm not sure you've met before.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Wright with The New Yorker. And I want to talk to you about transparency, which as a reporter I'm normally very much in favor of. But right now, America, not just Americans, we're all under siege by having our private information taken. Not just the intelligence agencies, which have been robbed. The most secret things in NSA have been taken and are being sold on the black market on the internet. Every American business of any standing has had its trade secrets stolen. And I bet everybody in this room has lost their social security number, probably their health care information, all of this on the market. So my question is, how do we get to be able to have secrets once again? Not just in the CIA, but in how are we going to be able to establish a kind of privacy that we once enjoyed?
Look, protection of privacy is certainly an important thing that we do at the agency. We are not the central repository of privacy protection in the United States. There are many agencies that have responsibility for that. But frankly, in America, most of that work is done in our private sector, right? One of the advantages that other countries have that aren't democracies is they have a highly centralized capacity to control information. And when you can do that, you can protect your secrets better, make no mistake about it. It is harder in a place like ours where most of the infrastructure that you speak of, data sets, information that people provide voluntarily, our medical records, most all of those are stored today in the private sector. So there's a role. The CIA has a small piece of that role to try and ensure that there is knowledge of the threat. That is, situational awareness is the beginning of protection and security and the keeping of secrets. And then we have a role too in helping understand the threat vectors so that those really tasked with protecting the homeland, DHS and others, have an understanding of sufficient depth that they can begin to help the private sector achieve the secrecy that I think everyone in this room would hope that we could see. It's tough. It's a tough world. And it's even tougher when you operate in a democracy like ours. I wouldn't trade it for a thing, but it sure does make keeping secrets more difficult.
Perfect. Let me turn over this way, find a student. Mr. Curran.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're not going to appeal your grade, are you?
Professor Slick has wronged me on multiple occasions. And I would like to take this opportunity to air some grievances. No. Director, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit after seeing the intelligence community's reform organizationally from the congressional side, what it's been like in your new position as the director of CIA, especially anything that changed from the shift from director of national intelligence, Dempsey, to Coates.
Yeah. So I answer this question always with full disclosure. If you want to know what I thought on January 22nd of this year, you can go Google my name and type in DNI, and you'll get my view of what ought to happen there. But now that I'm here, I'll speak about the existing structure and the things I think we ought to do. So I've known Senator Coates, Director Coates, a long time. He is able and capable, and I think working to put the ODNI in the right place to deliver the things that they're perfectly structured to do. And frankly, I think what Congress intended when they created this back in 04, 05, to take those things that are across the intelligence community and deliver them with excellence and create value through the synergy that comes from there, and to stay out of those things that are more properly done by the leaders of the NRO or the NGA or the CIA. So I think we've struck precisely the right balance. I know the history where there have been conflicts between the CIA director and the director of national intelligence. Stand by, it could happen tomorrow, but it hasn't happened yet. I don't expect that it will because we communicate frequently about what we're doing, how we're doing it, what we're trying to accomplish, and then there's not much ego there. We're trying to figure out who is best positioned to achieve that outcome, and we hand the mission to the right organization. I do hope that the administration will take a good look at the structure of the intelligence community. We're now 12 years on. I haven't seen an organization survive 12 years without the need for change in my lifetime. That implies necessarily that I think this one needs to change. I don't want to go in today what I think they are. I've certainly shared them with Director Coates. But I hope the administration will conduct a very thorough review of this and then deliver that to the folks that will make the changes, Congress, right? This is almost all statutory. And so deliver to Congress our collective assessment of the changes that ought to be made. Small, big, whatever they are. The mission set isn't about protecting the CIA or any other intelligence agency or the DNI. It's about delivering for the United States, and I think it is more than timely that we conduct a very, very complete review and then let the chips fall where they may, based on the data set.
Mr. Director, may I just follow up very, very quickly on that one? This asks you to look back at the body you were previously part of, but for those of us who were involved in the 2004 legislation process and the response to the 9/11 Commission. That was a close-run thing. We barely got that law, even given the imperative of the 9/11 attacks that were still fresh in everybody's mind. As you say, we're 12 years down the road. Do you have a sense that the U.S. Congress, given its functioning today, could tackle something as potentially controversial as reform of intelligence, further reform of intelligence? Absolutely. It was tough to do in 2004.
Yeah, I think absolutely they can. I actually don't think, I don't know the history of the controversy. My sense is there are a handful of things that we would find enormous consensus around that ought to be changed, things that just didn't work or have evolved in ways that are no longer optimal. I actually don't think, there are probably places that are controversial, but I think the majority of the changes that ought to be made, there would be enormous consensus. And I'd add to this, with respect to the congressional piece, one of the great blessings of being the CIA director is almost everything we do has no partisan tinge to it. There are a handful of issues, you can see them, you would know them. But the vast majority of the time when I'm down testifying on Capitol Hill, I am equally critiqued from the left and the right. And applauded roughly equally as well. That is, these are folks who have chosen to be on those committees and to serve America in that special way, to do oversight of the intelligence community. Critically important because they are the place that has the insight, right? We operate in this clandestine space. If you're doing oversight of the Department of Commerce, it's just different. They're out there. The public has a chance to opine with nearly full transparency. That's not the case in the intelligence world. And so they have an even more important obligation not to be political, but to get it right. And my experience both during my 4 years on the committee and now 9 months here is that that works across nearly every subject matter. It is truly a group of people trying to help us all get it right.
That is the model, as you know. Yeah. There are proxies. They're looking out for our interests, those of us who are not inside that circle. Is that Eric? Yeah, please. Eric Schmidt from the New York Times. I'll introduce you while we're waiting for
Thanks, Steve.
I saw him when I came in.
Yeah, I know.
Two questions.
You had it cased down.
Two questions, Mr. Director. The Pentagon in the last few weeks has carried out 2 strikes against resurgent ISIS cells in Libya. You spent a lot of time in the Hill looking at Libya and Benghazi in particular. What's your assessment right now of the security situation in Libya and any of the foreign actors who may try and take advantage of that political chaos there? And second, on North Korea, the President has conducted an extraordinary exchange of insults with the North Korean leader. What, if anything, new have you and your analysts learned about Kim Jong-un from that exchange that may help you understand his motivations and where he's coming from?
Yeah, two good questions. I'll take the first one first, and the second one I probably won't answer, so it's perfect. So the agency's view in Libya is that we continue to have a modest but resurgent threat from ISIS. We're worried as the campaign in eastern Syria and in Iraq winds down, as it is today, that we'll continue to see fighters move into that space in the Sahel, North Africa, Libya, and so we continue to believe that we have to take it to Daesh there as well. That will be important in continuing to protect the homeland from that threat. And so the actions you saw DOD take and our intelligence would confirm that we still have a threat there. It is also the case that there is continued risk that AQ, Al-Qaeda, will continue its efforts and become resurgent there as well. You see them in Mali and Niger. You see AQAP continuing to have a robust capacity in Yemen, and so those threats remain. You see the Europeans taking some good actions in Libya. They understand the threat that those fighters who have returned to North Africa potentially pose to them. It's a lot easier to get to Italy from Libya than it is to Denver or Austin, and so they're concentrating on that as well. And then there's not much to add. The political situation there is incredibly fluid as well. Our analysts continue to watch as the forces of General Haftar on the east continue to make some progress, but we have not yet provided enough information to help our diplomats achieve an outcome that would be a diplomatic solution there that would be the right one for America and for the world. As for North Korea, we created in my first handful of weeks a mission center with a large group of folks very focused on this task. The president has made very clear that that the capacity of Kim Jong-un to hold America at risk from nuclear weapons is unacceptable. And the commander's intent is deeply understood by the intelligence community as well as by others in the national security community. I've heard some pundits say that there's not a military response, and I always joke by saying, that's funny, I've seen 4 of them. This is serious business, and we are intent on delivering the president with intelligence not only about Kim Jong-un, but about the leaders around him, about what's going on in the commercial space, what's going on amongst a broader set of elites inside of North Korea. I can't say much about that here today, but it is a very tough target, but one against which we have made significant progress in the last few months. Much more work to do, but we are on the cusp, I think, of delivering an analytic product to our senior leaders that would compare with some of the analysis we can do in other places around the world.
Good to hear. Other students? Ma'am, here in the front. Jackie, nice to see you.
Hi. Okay. So, about movement. That have been pushed, and it has the potential to define a lot of relationships and connections. And so, considering people in government don't like to be surprised, and there are a lot of really abrupt changes, I guess I was wondering how the fusion of all of those changes or potential for change is affecting
Yeah. So are you speaking of populist movements in Western countries, or are you thinking of what's happened in Kurdistan, or the Kurdish Regional Republic in Iraq, or are you thinking of Spain and Catalonia? When you say populism, tell me what you're thinking of, and I'll try and help shape the answer, rather.
I guess I'm thinking around the world, but also specifically in the West.
Yeah.
Global coverage.
Yeah. So I hope this doesn't surprise you. The CIA spends stunningly little time staring at the political movements around the world. When I say that, we have a task to understand, but primarily, remember, we're a foreign intelligence collection service. We do some work on that topic, but it's not, most of it's open press, right? And so we'll report on that through open sources, but most of what happens in the Bundestag or in the Israeli parliament isn't the stuff of clandestine work. You just go get the transcript. So it is not at the center of our intelligence collection effort. We do try and provide analysis. We try and provide our senior leaders predictive analysis about how we think political trends may be moving in particular countries. We have in my 9 months, I've seen 3 or 4 of those products. We have a spotty record at being able to predict those. So we've gotten a couple right, that is, we've been able to provide notice about movements that were emerging in certain countries. In other places, we frankly just missed it.
How would you recommend? Sir, in the back. Yep, with the blue blazer. No, I'm sorry, the fellow in front of you in the blue blazer there. Thanks. Great.
Director, my name is Hasib Abdullah. I'm a resident here in Austin. You mentioned that there's a lot of foreign intelligence services that you use information from. Obviously, many of those don't follow the U.S. Constitution and the law here. If there's certain situations where foreign intelligence that you think it's pretty good intelligence uses extrajudicial killing, torture of family members and stuff to get that good intelligence, would you use that, or do the ends ever justify the means for you or the administration? Thank you.
So there are an elaborate set of rules, not of my creation, that long predate me. Steve probably wrote them.
Those are the good ones.
The good ones, the ones that work. that govern those agencies that we're permitted to work with and those that we are not. There's a long review process. I can't go into the details, but suffice it to say, we take great heed of not using proxies to do things that we are not permitted to do. And my observation in my 9 months and all of the history that I have seen is that that is not honored merely in the breach, but is something at the forefront of the way we think about things. I've seen the history too. We've probably gotten that wrong from time to time, but it is not for lack of a robust review effort, a deep deliberative process, a very senior level set of decisions that get made when we get to a place where we're concerned that there's a liaison partner or even an asset that is not a liaison partner that's doing things that are just outside, beyond the ken, something that is intolerable and would be inconsistent with the way we operate. And we certainly never want to do it when we might be, in fact, creating an incentive for that type of behavior. So there's a rigid process. Senior leaders like myself are involved in it, and I'm confident we get it right with great frequency.
And as a teaching point, people of a certain vintage refer to this as the Iran-Contra rules. At the CIA, it was always well understood when we were there that the agency cannot ask a foreign government to do something they would not be legally permitted to do themselves. And that was a lesson hard learned in the mid-1980s. Fellow in a white shirt back here? Yes. No, behind there. Thank you. Great, thanks.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, Director. Thank you for coming out. Like you mentioned, the CIA and other intelligence agencies are about secrecy and secrets. At the same time, they are accountable to the American people through institutions like the news media, which can frequently report on not only operations but leaks that you might not necessarily want getting out. So, where do you see the balance between a robust media holding the CIA accountable and while maintaining the secrets? And do you think that balance is currently being achieved?
Yeah, it's not about what I think, right? There's a set of laws. There's rules. There's the First Amendment. So it's an interesting question what Mike Pompeo might think, but it's not the important question. The important question is where we find ourselves today and the laws that we operate under, and the agency operates under them. As for balance, the American people will sort their way through it. I don't speak publicly very often. When I said this is a privilege, it's a privilege I intend to undergo only very infrequently. I say that when I speak, I almost always, and I left it out in my remarks this morning, but I'm ever mindful that we do have an obligation to CIA, and that is to demonstrate, not talk about, but demonstrate our activities, what we do and what we don't do, in a way that will continue to garner the trust of the American people. We have enormous authority and power at the CIA. And you all have, I think, made a really good decision to entrust that to us. We have to earn that. And to the extent possible, we need to communicate what we're doing and what we're not doing. And so when I speak, it's often in that vein. It is to talk about the things we do, the nature of the people. I don't talk about how great the officers are and the character of my officers, so that when I get back to headquarters, they'll like me better. Although, if any of you are watching,
you're great.
But I do it because the agency is made up of people that fill this room from all walks of life, but they come in with a singular focus, right, is to be part of this important mission. And yep, every organization's got bad apples, but I think we have fewer than our fair share by any stretch of the imagination. And so it is important that we are as transparent as we can possibly be. In every realm, I have pushed that. We're going to release some documents that my predecessor didn't want to release. I've concluded we can. We're going to do it soon, next couple of weeks. We ought to do that every place we can. And because absent that, if we don't have the trust of the American people, this authority will go away. And in my judgment, America will be ill-served if those authorities go away. Second, and this is the balance to that, I think people in the press have an obligation as well. I am deeply respectful of First Amendment freedoms, but it's the case that when a newspaper like Mr. Schmidt's newspaper publishes the name of one of our covered officers, I find that deplorable. This is a person who has sacrificed his whole life on behalf of America. We've done our darndest to keep his name secret, and a major media outlet, in spite of our request not to publish that person's name, chose to do so. Today that's lawful, and that's fine, but it is, in my view, inconsistent with their obligation. Not a legal obligation, but one that is a moral obligation to be part of this important conversation about transparency and secrecy. If we do that right, we'll get the right balance in America. We always do. And we each, all of us, citizens, the media, and the intelligence community have an obligation to work towards that every day.
I'm going to exercise the prerogative to ask the last question. We're going to have to let the director get on his way. You pitched our crowd earlier at the end of your speech.
I hope
There's a lot of talent in the room.
I hope I wasn't too subtle with my pitch.
No,
yes.
They got it. Your recruiters in the crowd. You've been in public service since you're 18 and 19 years old, with a break, but you're back. What would you say about serving the public? Its rewards, its costs?
Yeah.
A lot of people out here are headed that direction, and your wisdom would be useful.
So my view of this is pretty straightforward. I lucked into this opportunity to go to West Point when I was 18 years old, and got a chance to watch come out. I came out in the Army in the Reagan heyday. It was a great time to be an armor officer, and I got a chance to see what it means to serve, how you can do it. I get to see all the downside too, right? I remember what my first paycheck as a second lieutenant was. But it is noble duty. It is also a place where you as a young person can get incredible challenges that are more difficult to get in the private sector. I was talking about technology. If you're a really good with computers or technology, there are a few places where you can get a chance to go do some of the coolest stuff with the resources you need, like the intelligence community, not just with us, but with the NSA and others as well. So it is a great thing when you get the chance to serve and have the white hat as well, and you get a chance to return at least a little bit what America has provided to someone like me. So I would urge folks to do it. I also think I'm not somebody who thinks that the private sector is different from that. One of the greatest memories in my life is when I could offer someone a job, right? So I ran a business, and when you could sit across from someone, I have a lathe, and I want you to be my lathe operator, and they could go home that night and tell their spouse, I got a paycheck, we can go on vacation, all those things. Those are wonderful too. Each has its own personal rewards, but there are real, there are bigger things in the world than that, and it's an incredible privilege now to sit in this place where I get to lead an organization that is very, very focused on a piece of that important task.
Thank you. You've been generous with your time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you.